Hey guys. So, just to review what we did last week, we started going over basic shapes and forms. And remember, a shape is two dimensional, like a circle, meaning it's flat. And then a form is something that is three dimensional. So that would be like a sphere. And obviously, if you're drawing on your paper, it's all actually flat and two dimensional. So if we want something to appear three dimensional, we have to uh, make it appear three dimensional by adding value. So these darker areas and the lighter areas, and that creates the illusion of depth. So it makes it look three dimensional. So last week we were covering these simple forms: spheres, cubes, and then on Friday we went over cones and cylinders. So, as I said last week, the reason we're covering all these really simple forms is that you can put them together to create forms that are more complex. So, we're going to do a little bit of that today. So, we've got two bottles I want you to look at. Whoops. So, if you look at them closely, you can see these different forms that we talked about. And you can see that these two bottles are slightly different shapes and they have different shapes in them. So if we start with this blue bottle, you can see here, if you just look at this bit here, you can see our cylinder, right? Like we talked about on Friday. And then on top of that, if you just look at this bit here, you can see our cone. And then on top, we've got a simple tube, so just a small cylinder. So big cylinder, and then a cone, and then a small cylinder. And then if we look at our yellow bottle, down here we've got a long skinny cylinder, right? And then if you cover up most of that and you're just looking at this, it's like half of a sphere, right? Just the top half of a sphere. And then if you look above that, we've got a simple tube again. So just a small skinny cylinder. So we're going to draw both of these today. So for this, remember, we are just going to start with our cylinder. So to do our cylinder, we start with basically a rectangle, right? So we've got two parallel lines that are going vertically. Actually, this one is not really all that skinny. So we'll do that. And that's one benefit to always kind of starting off light and sketchy, is that you can easily correct those mistakes. Like so. So to make it a cylinder, what do? We put an ellipse on the top. And then down here at the bottom, we're going to put a little curve on it, and that curve is going to match the bottom half of this ellipse. And there we go. We've got a cylinder. So I'm just going to clean this up a little bit. And then on the top of that, we've got, sorry, I have a black table, so it's hard to see anything. We've got that cone, right? So for a cone, you start off with basically a triangle. And I'm going to just find my middle here. I'm going to go up with a center line. And so that way I can easily make sure my bottle is not going off in some crazy direction as it goes up. So I'm just going to make a simple triangle. There we go. With that, I'm going to make a simple triangle that starts up here and is on that center line, my point of it. And it's going to come down and meet this top edge of my cylinder. Clean that up a bit too. And here we go. That's actually straight. Okay, and then we've got that skinny tube on top, right? So I'm going to come down here and I'm just going to do a little horizontal line across. That way I can make sure that I'm starting the tube in the same place. And then I'm just going to come up, and my lines here are going to be parallel to this center line. So that's why I did the center line. It's going to help me keep everything going straight and centered and all of that. And then if you'll notice up here at the very top of this, we've got a small little bit that comes out. So I'm going to go ahead and I'll put that ellipse on top of my cylinder, curve the bottom a bit, and then I'm going to do that little wider bit there. And again, guys, just like with the other videos, follow along with me. And, if you need to take an extra minute for something, you just pause it and go right on ahead. So at the end of this, you're just going to take a picture of your page and upload it in Google Classroom. So now I'm going to, now I've got the basics of my bottle here. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to erase some of these formation lines, or at the very least, I'm going to lighten them up a bit. I still want to kind of see where some of them are, but I don't want them to be dark. Okay, so now we can start shading. So we're just going to shade this in the same way that we shaded our shapes, right? So I'm going to have my light kind of coming from this direction. So that means my shadow is going to be over here, right? So do you remember how we shaded a cylinder? When our light's coming from here, it's this area that's going to be darkest. So I'm going to start over there. And remember, as we're shading, we're just doing light overlapping circles with our pencil. We don't want to do lines because then we're going to be able to see the strokes really well. But if you do these light overlapping circles, it's all just going to kind of blend together. And we want to start off light because we can always go darker later on. And it's always easy to go darker, but it's difficult to go lighter. Adding is always easier than subtracting. Actually, my line was supposed to be here, not there. It's okay, that's why we have an eraser. So I'm just going to kind of add that shadow all the way up. On my cylinder. Remember, you want to be using very light pressure here. We're going to go back and just add more to it, and so we'll slowly build up that value. All right, so we're up here at the top of the cylinder. And so now I'm going to go back. I'm going to build up my value a little bit. I'm going to bring this a little bit over because remember my light's coming down. So we are going to get a little bit darker toward the bottom. And I really want to deepen the shadow that's on the back, especially. Another thing, guys, that I think I forgot to mention in some of the other videos is that you want to make sure your pencil is sharp. It seems like a really simple thing, but it actually can make a big difference in things like your shading and making these, small, soft circles. So make sure you're keeping your pencil sharp. There we go. We're just going to keep deepening this a little bit more. And since our light is coming from here, our darkest little bit is going to be right there in the opposite corner. And then if you'll notice here, you see this comes in just a teeny bit. So that means the whole bottom edge is going to be a little dark. So I'm going to go ahead and darken that up. And this is just one example of an object that you can do this with. Really, you can section almost anything into these simpler forms, which is why it's so important that we started with those with this class, because once you have those, you have the basic building blocks to make pretty much anything. So then we're going to come up to our cone. So if you'll remember, a cone is shaded, it's a very similar to a cylinder where you've got your light, and here it's kind of flipped around the opposite way. But you've got your light coming, and so that bit that's closest to the light will be your lightest area. Your darkest area will be this back bit, and then you've got the middle bit. So the difference with a cone is that it's all kind of going toward that top point instead of just being vertical. And actually, I forgot. You know what? I'll worry about that later. So, sorry, not really thinking there. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing here. This bit over here, since our light is coming from this way, this bit is going to be our darkest area. And just like before, we're going to start just at the edge. Nice and light. And add a bit of color in there. And so it's not going to be super dark at first, just like we've been doing all last week. We're going to start off light, and then we'll deepen that value as we go on. And so you can see I'm just trying to blend my shading a bit between the cone and the cylinder, so it's more like a single object, which, it is. So then we'll come back here and we're just deepening our value. Wait, sorry, this is bothering me. There. Okay, so we're just going to be deepening this value a bit here. So we get closer to the edge and farther away from the light. So this is where the middle of this bottle, this edge, is kind of blocking the light from reaching the back side. So that's what's causing this darker shadow to happen. And so right along that back edge is going to be where it's really dark. And we're kind of blending this in to our cylinder here at the bottom, so it's like seamless and it's all just one object. And then coming up here, we've got our last little cylinder, right? So we're just doing the same thing. We're starting at the edge, adding value on the side that's opposite from our light source, which is going to be our darkest area. And then we go and we kind of deepen the value right along the edge. And then I'm going to add a little bit of a shadow right underneath this kind of lip that sticks out a bit, because that's going to be blocking light from getting here, right? And so we've got the lip itself. And so we're going to shade that like it's its own little cylinder, with our darkest area being right along here. And then we've got our top bit. And then for the top of this, it's going to be similar to how we shade in that coffee cup. We'll show how it kind of gets darker as it goes in, and later as it gets out toward the top. So that's it. Let me check how long this video is, and I'm going to see about that other bottle. Wait, sorry. Okay, well, I'm having trouble figuring out how to check how long this is, so Y'all are just going to be with me for the ride. Okay. So we've got our other bottle now. So remember, this is a very thin cylinder. So again, we're going to start with a pair of parallel lines because we're starting with, wait, so this is going to be thinner than the other one. There we go. So we start with a rectangle, right, to make a cylinder. Because remember, our shapes here are a very long and skinny cylinder, a little like half sphere. So we're just going to draw a sphere on top of our cylinder, and then that skinny tube on top. So we've got our lines for our cylinder, and instead of doing horizontal lines, which would give us a rectangle, we're going to put an ellipse on the top. And then we'll curve the bottom to match the bottom of our ellipse. Oh, wow. Okay. I can't tell if the angle is just weird on my document camera or if this is really janky. I think it may be some of both. Okay, I think that looks a little bit better. So we're going to come along here, and so we're just going to curve this to match the bottom of that ellipse. There we go. And then, actually, I think we need to bring it up a little bit. Okay. So then we've got our cylinder here. And so on the top of that cylinder was a sphere, right? Because if you look at this, I mean, there you've got half a sphere, but you can see where you could just draw a whole circle right in there, right? So that's what we're going to do. We're going to just draw a circle right in here. And then we'll kind of blend it into our cylinder where it touches. And that's it. I'm going to get rid of some of these lines. And I'm going to use that same vertical line that I used for this bottle. I'm going to do it here too. So I'm going to kind of find my center and just go straight up. And that's going to help me whenever I'm, there we go, whenever I'm putting that top little tube on. This one, we didn't have like where it comes out, goes back in, and then up. It just is a wider cylinder on top. And then we're going to smooth this out a bit, kind of like how it is here. Oh, geez. This is really, really thin. I'm sorry. Okay. Fix that. And then, here we go. We'll widen this a bit too. All right. Sounds good. Shape. Or actually, yeah, why not? So I'm just cleaning this up a little bit because I have a lot of kind of those formation lines still visible. So since we're drawing these in one kind of piece together, this is still our light source. So you have kind of the same sort of thing going on here. So I'm just adding a little bit of value onto the bottom of this, onto that bottom edge. It's all really light and sketchy, and I'm going to come back and darken out later. Remember, like I keep saying, it is always easier to go darker than it is to go lighter. Always easier to add than it is to subtract. So, you don't want to start off just with using really heavy pressure and going too dark too fast. Always better to start off light. Oh dear. Okay. So let's see. So we're just shading in our cylinder here. And again, we're going to use the basic rules for shading a cylinder to do that, which is that if our light's coming this way, this area is what's going to be the most in shadow. So I'm just kind of marking that area off for myself. So I know this is where my shadow is all going to be. Hang on. I'm going to need to plug my computer in real quick. Okay. All right. So sorry, but if I'd recorded this much of a video and then my computer died, I would have been very, very sad. So here we go. And so we're just going to keep doing this. Now remember those overlapping circles. And as you build them up more, that's going to become smoother. coming all the way up to the top of my cylinder here. And I'm not really messing it too much. So if you'll remember, we had that top of a sphere. So our cylinder is actually coming up to about like there. So I'm just shading that in because we're going to be shading the rest of that in the way we would a sphere. So I'm just going to go ahead and darken up this edge here. I want to try and make that darkening toward the edge gradual, where you don't see like stripes. Again, I'm darkening up that bottom edge. And there we go. So for the top of this, it's going to be like a sphere. So that's going to be like here, right? So kind of blending in here. Just going to go ahead and remember that our light's coming from this direction. So this, clean it up a little bit. This area is our lighter area, and then this is darker. So we're going to get darker and darker as we get toward our edge. And then remember, this bit here is going to be our other two. So we're going to, well, first let me erase these sketchy marks that I'm making to show you which shape is which. Then we're going to be shading this in like another cylinder. So again, our darkest area will be right on that edge. So I'm starting off really light again, and then darkening right at that edge. And then up here, this is kind of its own little cylinder. And we are going to shade in the very edges of it. Kind of around a bit. I'm going to shade along the bottom, the same way we did along this, the same way we did along this bottom. Ah, I smudged it, no! But the same way we shaded along this bottom, we're going to shade along the very bottom of this mini cylinder too. Maybe a teeny bit right underneath. And darkest along that edge there. I'm just going to shade a bit on the inside here, again like we did with the coffee cup. That's going to kind of give the impression that there is this kind of flat, rounded top. Of course, we can go along and continue darkening and developing the color a bit more, but this video is long enough, and I think you guys get it, and you can, manage that if you want to, continue to darken and develop those values. And and like I said earlier, we're using bottles today to kind of demonstrate that, how you can put these simple forms together into one piece. But it doesn't stop there. I'm sure you've all seen, how to draw so and such books or instructions where, they always tell you to start off with, various geometric shapes. And this is kind of going along the same lines. So, if you were to draw, say, like a hand, all this is a rectangular prism, a skinny one, with a whole bunch of cubes on top. And then when you move the cubes around a bit and at different angles, then you can articulate the fingers. So even things that we normally think of as being very difficult to draw, like a hand, is much simpler when you can break it down into those simple geometric shapes. So that's kind of why we're starting off with this, because when you know how to handle those basic building blocks, then you can do pretty much anything when you put them together. One thing you can't put geometric shapes together to make is what we refer to as organic shapes. And so that's what we're going to look at tomorrow. And organic just means something that is not geometric. So if you look at a leaf or a flower or, I don't know, a pear, just things like that are more natural and that are alive, tend to not be in these perfectly geometric shapes. So we're going to take a look at that tomorrow as we continue this Drawing Basics unit. So thank you so much for joining me today. And whenever you are done with your picture, please take a photo of it and upload that. Thank you so much. I'll see y'all tomorrow.